and we can get started. All right, so hello and welcome to our fall 2024 Human Rights Defender Speaker Series. We actually started this series when COVID started, and we have continued since, and it really is a highlight for our educators and our network to meet folks like you who are on the front line defending, protecting, and promoting human rights. My name is Karen Robinson, and I'm the Human Rights Education Program Director here at Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. And with us today, we have Pauline Arrillaga, Elise Gregg, Jasari Kual, Mingson Lau, and Roswell Goransson. Thank you all so much for being with us. If you're in the audience and you have a question throughout the conversation, just pop it in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and at the end of the formal presentation, if we have time, we'll jump into some of those questions that are in the chat. I would like to thank Pauline. She's the executive director at the prestigious Carnegie Knight News 21 program, housed at Arizona State University's Cronkite School for Journalism and Mass Communication. I'd also like to thank Elise, who is a journalist in Florida, just finished her master's, and she's currently interning at WLRN Public Radio. Jasari Kual, who founded Valiant Post, a digital news outlet, and Qualdom Creations, a broadcasting and media production company in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Mingson Lau, a digital-focused reporter at KSNV News 3, who reports, films, and edits broadcast, social, and digital videos. Together with Pauline and 25 journalists from universities across the U.S., including these 2023 News 21 fellows, they produced the award-winning project America After Roe, which examines the wide-scale and often devastating impact of the historic overturning of Roe v. Wade a year after the discussion. Thank you all for joining us. Yeah. And I would also like to welcome our fabulous moderator, Roswell Goransson, from the Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders in Austin, Texas. He will be our moderator today. So today, Pauline, Elise, Jasari, and Mingson will discuss their investigative work documenting the far-reaching impact of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Their in-depth journalism focuses on the stories of people whose lives have been affected by the decision, exploring how it has altered healthcare, policy, and culture. They will also touch on the importance of human rights reporting and ways that students can write about these issues in their own communities. And framing, I'd like to just, in a couple of paragraphs, frame the human rights, the reproductive rights as a human rights issue, and note that it recognizes that everyone has the right to life, a right to health, and a right to be free from violence, discrimination, torture, cruel, and inhumane and degrading treatment. Access to abortion is vital to the protection of these rights, as well as other human rights enshrined in international human rights law. All people have the right to bodily autonomy, which is another reason why anyone who can become pregnant should have access to safe abortions. However, many people, especially those from historically marginalized communities, face economic, social, and political conditions that hinder their ability to exercise reproductive autonomy. So before we dive deeper into this conversation, I'd like to just quickly introduce you to our organization. Robert F. Kennedy advocates for human rights issues and pursues strategic litigation to hold governments accountable at home and around the world. Our human rights education program combines storytelling and interactive learning to provide the next generation with the concrete knowledge they need to create change and advance human rights. And with that, I will turn it over to Ross, who helped produce this year's Speak Truth to Power video contest grand prize film, Don't Mess with Texas, an abortion story. So to kick off, maybe if you could just touch on that a little, Ross, and then take it away with Pauline and Elise, Jasari, and Mingson.
Hi, everybody. So thank you so much, Karen, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to everyone on the panel today who's going to be speaking. So for everyone watching, if you have questions, please send those in the chat, and then I will be sort of filtering those through to the participants. So why am I qualified to do this? Well, I'm a student filmmaker. Myself and two of my classmates, Ellison Martin and Choli Tova Hurt, we produced a film called Don't Mess with Texas, an abortion story, regarding, the changes in abortion rights in Texas and how those are affecting people, both, from politics to people who are being directly affected by it to, doctors. So we interviewed multiple people who were very familiar with the issue. Amanda Zorofsky, the main plaintiff in Zorofsky versus State of Texas, as well as Wendy Davis, and as well as a doctor who asked to remain anonymous for his own safety. But yeah, I think that bodily autonomy is an incredibly important thing as, somebody who could get pregnant, somebody who cares a lot about other people, and one of those rare and special transgender Texans. I think that medical bodily autonomy is one of the most important things that we can talk about in this country right now. So let's turn this over to Pauline and let her introduce herself and talk about her work.
Sure. I'm Pauline Arrillaga, and I'm the executive editor of News 21. And, Roz, I can also just jump right in if you want to, in terms of sort of how we came to this, if you'd like, or do you want to do introductions first?
I figured that, well, first, congratulations are in order. Congratulations to all of you for winning the Book and Journalism Award grand prize. That's such an amazing thing. So yeah, I would like to hear from all of you who participated in the project, giving a brief explanation of your work on the project and what motivated you to work on it.
Sure.
Starting with Pauline.
Sure. So first I'll say thank you. And I burst into tears when I found out that we won the grand prize and not just the College Journalism Award for this work. I'm the executive editor of News 21. Prior to coming to the Cronkite School, I was at the Associated Press as a writer and editor for 27 years. And, I will say, so News 21, first and foremost, is a very unique college journalism program. We bring together student journalists of all ages from across the United States. So on the year we worked on America After Roe, we had 25 student journalists from 9 different universities. This year's cohort, we had 29 student journalists from 14 different universities. They're also working in all formats. So we have writers, video journalists, audio journalists, photographers, who come together every year and work on one big topic. And in 2023, of course, it was the reversal of Roe v. Wade. A lot of people ask, how did you decide on that topic? And I will say, I actually did choose the topic, and then the students themselves worked to identify individual stories to report on. And what I will say is, for me, choosing that topic in 2023 was just a no-brainer. And I told the students this when they started in January of 2023. In June of 2022, the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, tossed it back to the states. And so we knew that, when our project came out, it was going to be a year later, a year after that decision. And we knew that we were still going to be seeing action in state legislatures, in the courts, confusion among doctors, among patients. There were a lot of question marks about how would this actually play out. And honestly, I felt like there was no story that was more important that we could cover that year than this topic. I felt like we had a duty to really continue digging into how all of this was going to unfold and what the aftermath would be after that unprecedented decision.
Thank you so much. Okay, Jazari, can we hear from you next about your work on the project and your motivations behind it?
All right. Yeah, so my name is Jazari. I'm here in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is the capital of Nebraska. And when, the overturning of Roe had happened, our state I live in more of a red state. And so there was already kind of movement in our state legislature to have new laws on the books when the overturning had happened. And so while I was here, kind of when we were doing our pre-reporting stages in the spring, I was actually going to our state legislature and speaking with different senators, gathering different content that we could use for the story, because I knew as soon as I was going to be heading to Phoenix, that's when our legislative session was going to wrap up. So whatever would have happened by the time I left. And so I was able to gather some content and photos and media that we were able to use in different stories for legislative stories in the project. Aside from that, I was actually on a reporting team with Elise, and we went to Texas. We went to Austin, Houston, and Dallas, and spent like 24 hours in Houston and 24 hours in Dallas before coming back to Phoenix. And we spoke with different OBGYNs about how their practices have been impacted since the reversal of Roe v. Wade and since the new Texas abortion restrictions went into place. And we also spoke with Amanda Zarowski and her husband on their experience. And from all of that I gathered with our colleagues that had went to different other states, such as North Dakota and Georgia, and speaking with other OBGYNs there, I was able to create a documentary on how this has impacted OBGYN practice overall. And it was really unique to be able to hear from different doctors in different states in different parts of their careers. And they all kind of said the same thing of how, medicine is not black and white, and how they have seen different challenges, just providing whatever kind of care they need to for their patients. And so that's what I worked on in my time in News 21.
Thank you so much. Elise, can we hear from you next?
Hi, everyone. My name's Elise. I'm here in Miami, which is not the capital of Florida, but a lot of people think it should be. And like Jazari said, I worked with him and one of our colleagues, April, on maternal health. That was one of two stories I worked on. The other one I worked on was looking at how the legal system was impacted by, the Dobbs v. Jackson decision, looking at how state prosecutors were kind of being caught in this, weird shift in changes to the criminal justice system, legal changes, kind of the political craziness of it, which is my personal passion. So that's why I chose to explore that. For maternal health, Pauline actually threw me on that, and I was a little hesitant at first. That's really not my background. But I stuck with it, and it's one of the most, I think, impactful and meaningful stories I've ever had the privilege of covering. So thank you to Pauline for that. But like Jazari said, we spoke with doctors, we spoke with women who had been pregnant and really wanted their pregnancies, their children. And we will get, I'm sure, more into this during this panel, but really just in a holistic way, we explored, this side of looking at abortion medically, looking at it as, something for these mothers who had wanted their children, but like in any other kind of medical situation, things went wrong. And I think, it was really something that I not enjoyed doing, but was passionate reporting on, because I think it gave the conversation a lot of depth and dimension, and was just really informative. So thanks again to Pauline for throwing me on that last minute.
All right, awesome. And can we hear from Mingson last about his work on the project?
Hello, hello. I worked primarily on two stories. The first one being in Ohio. We visited the state as they were in the middle of this kind of canvassing battleground. We followed both sides as they worked on supporting or going against a proposal that would have made it more difficult to ban abortion in the state of Ohio. So we spent a lot of time walking with the canvassers, following what they were doing and learning why they were doing it. The other story was kind of centered around a character named Mark Lee Dixon. He kind of travels around the countries, visiting different towns, cities, to help communities petition and develop ordinances to ban abortion. And our story focused primarily in New Mexico and along the border towns between them and Texas.
At some point I will share
Awesome.
my screen and start to share some things. I just didn't want to do that while everyone was talking.
Yeah, the photography on the site is amazing. Okay, so I would really like to hear about you guys' process for sort of choosing your subjects for the interviews and for the photographs. And I'd like to know more about, like, was it very difficult to find people who were willing to speak on this? Whoever wants to can start first.
I mean, I'll just jump in really quickly. So yes, it was absolutely difficult. And part of the reason being, whether we're talking about doctors or patients, or even in some cases advocates, people were actually afraid of law enforcement, right? So there were some things that fell through that we wanted to do because people were concerned, people were worried about their own safety. And I can have everyone else talk about this. You know, in terms of patience, that was very, very difficult. And by the way, we started working on this in January of 2023 from afar. And then in the summer, they all came together in Phoenix. And for 10 weeks, we launched a newsroom, and then they travel around the country to report on these stories. So we actually did have some time to spend trying to build trust with sources. But even then, it was incredibly difficult. And so, as they know, one of the things that I actually did was I attended the National Conference of OBs and OBGYNs, and I used that ahead of our summer newsroom as a moment to really connect with OBs around the country. And let me tell you, they really came through for us. They met with us. They spent a lot of time with us. They helped connect us with some of their patients. They told us the stories of what they're going through, as well as what their patients were going through, but really difficult in terms of getting people to talk. And as everyone else talks, I'm going to start sharing some of the content. I don't know who wants to go next.
I can jump in. Yeah, like Pauline said, it was very difficult. Obviously, this is a very sensitive topic, and we're not just speaking to people who have academic backgrounds or, kind of these depersonalized view. We were talking to a lot of people who had been affected firsthand, by these new laws, by the Dobbs decision. So it was incredibly difficult. Jazari will remember we had people dropping out of interviews right as we had landed in some of the places we were supposed to do interviews. We had people who were asking, like, can we do Zoom? And we had to, like, work very hard to be sensitive, but also to make sure that we're telling these stories. So it was difficult. Pauline, we could not have done it without her. I'll probably say that a couple times today, but I mean, her going to that OBGYN conference, her helping us get a lot of sources was immensely helpful. And, not just speaking to subjects too, but I think we had to get creative on a lot of things. For example, with the maternal health story, I did have the privilege of speaking to some OBGYNs and patients. We had some of our colleagues who were gracious enough to share some of their material, but we also, looked at research, looked at a Kaiser Family Foundation, just a ton of data from them to, kind of tell that story. So it was tricky, but not unmanageable. And I think we pulled through with a lot of hard work and creativity. And again, lots of help from Pauline.
Yeah, I will also add to that. It was, I would say that what really helped us too was the lawsuit out of Texas, because the people who were named in that lawsuit were already at the time kind of doing some media interviews and things like that. There were a couple of women that we tried to speak with who did not feel comfortable going on camera. And the other thing too, it's that, a lot of these people are, this is just what happened to them. They're not really comfortable being in front of the camera or doing things like that. It's not for everybody to go out and give a whole sit down interview about what happened to them in a very sensitive situation like this. But the lawsuit did help us. We spoke with Dr. Judy Levison on the screen right there, and she gave us a whole bunch of insight on kind of why she decided to go into this. And her perspective was that she wanted to be a voice for other OBGYNs who were afraid of being retaliated against, because she said, I'm later in my career. I'm nearing the end of it, whereas some of these other younger OBs have younger families and things like that. And if there's anything she could do to kind of help, fight for medical freedom, she would do that. And so that's why she got involved in the lawsuit and was willing to speak out about it. But yeah, as Elise said, we had people dropping out of interviews. I would say we did have some OBs drop out, but one thing that we really, really wanted to make sure we had was that personal story. And Amanda and Josh were willing to speak out about that because, we could talk about doctors who can share stories of what happened to their patients, but it impacts in a different way having, the victim or whoever went through it speaking out about their experience.
And I wanted to add that, yeah, it was extremely difficult. A lot of these stories of those affected were very private, or they were uncomfortable with possible repercussions. I spoke with a number of medical students, OBGYN students, who were worried that if they were to speak out on the topic, they would face repercussions in their residency applications for their OBGYNs. But one sector that was actually fairly easy to reach out once we landed and were able to see them in person were people involved in grassroots efforts, people who were volunteering their time for one side or the other to go out and help raise awareness or canvas for what they believe was the appropriate path forward for their state.
All right, awesome. Thank you. And sort of continuing off of the, you interviewed people who were both pro-choice and pro-life. Could you guys all share a little, snippet of one of the stories that really helped you understand sort of the complexities of this issue, or that might help somebody in the audience who is less informed?
Yeah, I can start with that. Like you said, you interviewed the Zarowskis, and I think that's very illustrative example. To keep it kind of succinct here, the Zarowskis had wanted children, gone through rounds of IVF, got pregnant, and then the pregnancy was non-viable, medical issues. And Amanda needed an abortion to, avoid herself becoming sick. And she was unable to get one because they were in Texas. She developed sepsis and, came very close to passing because of it. That for me was like the main story for reporting on maternal health. And I think it kind of illustrated that this is really a medical issue. I think, people kind of boil it down to, pro-life, pro-choice, with like elective abortions or, this is a religious thing, this is a, Republican, Democrat, progressive, these very clear-cut lines. I think Jazari said it well with how some of our sources described it to us. There's a lot that's not really black and white. I think, the Zarowskis are a great example of like, hey, there are people who really want kids, but unfortunately, medical complications happen and you need surgeries, you need procedures to keep people safe, and abortions are one of those. So yeah, I think Zarowskis were a great example. Mingson, Jazari, if you guys have any, I could go on because again, the prosecutor story was really complex and gets into some of the non-medical stuff, but I could ramble, so I'll let you guys go ahead.
Yeah, I think they're Zarowskis too, kind of speaking with them and hearing both of their perspectives. I mean, Josh kind of feeling like there was nothing that he could do to, help his wife, but really just try to advocate for her as best as he could when she was not there because of falling into sepsis. Um, and yeah, and what also struck me was kind of how strong they were with telling their story and continuing on. I mean, they just spoke at the DNC and are still advocating for all of this and sharing their story. So that was one thing that was kind of really, really interesting to me too, just seeing how willing they were to keep sharing their story because they really didn't want something like this to happen to somebody else. And just hearing them explain kind of the experience and all of that. And like Elise said, it's a medical situation. And also from the OBs we gathered, everybody is different. Every pregnancy is different. Situations can happen. And that's why people form, longstanding relationships with their OBGYNs to make sure that they have the best possible care during their pregnancies. And yeah, a lot of people do boil it down to whether this is an elective abortion or not. And I think not a lot of, we were able to highlight Amanda and Josh, but there are a lot of stories that I've heard of since of, unprecedented situations and, illnesses striking people while they are, caring. And so their story was really, really, really strong. And we also spoke with, sorry, a woman in Dallas, Texas, who was helping get women from Dallas to an access state to be able to get whatever care they needed. And sometimes they were just like day trips, like they would fly out of Dallas and then fly back in, and really try to, Reverend Erica Ferguson, who helped over 250 women in New Mexico, flying from Texas to New Mexico. And that was also interesting too, to see how people are doing what they can at a grassroots level to make sure that people receive whatever care they're seeking or need.
Real quick on that, on Erica, I remember one story that she shared. A lot of these people that she was flying to different states to get abortions. They have never flown on a plane, and they were experiencing other stress factors that made the trip difficult, and financial factors. I remember one story she shared, as they were passing through security, there were a number of guard dogs, and one of the women nearly fainted because of the experience. She was afraid of dogs, apparently. But one thing that did catch my eye involving people was back in Ohio. It was just, in a way, how similar both sides were in their grassroots efforts. There were a lot of parallels in the way they were going out to people and conversing with them. If you took out what they said and what they were wearing, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell which side was which. Just in the way they were really doing their best to reach out to their neighbors to inform them of what was going on and trying to get their support, it was very similar.
And I was going to say, real quick before we switch to the next question, if I could just real quick jump in with kind of what Mingson said. I just remembered this from our maternal health story. I forget whether we had to cut it for length or not. But there was a legislator in Florida who I spoke with, and she was the sponsor of one of the, actually both abortion bans in Florida, but in particular the 6-week one. And, when I got on the phone with her, I was a little anxious about speaking with her because I wasn't sure if she'd be kind of hostile with me, given the topic. But she was just very forthcoming, and I asked her like, what made you interested in sponsoring this and writing this up? She's like, listen, my values are families and families first. I'm also, trying to put together laws to make adoptions easier. And I don't think it's like that with everyone, but I think, it did again kind of highlight some of the complexities of this. I think like Mingson said, you take away some of the outside stuff, and there's, you see a lot of people with just these very deeply held values. I think, what you do to clear up some of the complexities on that as a journalist, though, is just look for the facts and present them. So I had to ask her, like, this is what I'm seeing with women in Texas who I'm reporting on right now. The 6-week ban wouldn't really, work for them because these health complications are happening well after the 6-week mark. And, she had to be able to answer for that and speak to that herself. But, I think, again, a lot of people, I think you see some of the vitriol and you see some of the meaner side of things. But I think when you really speak to people and kind of try to brush past some of the complexities and you present the facts, you find people to be a little more reasonable than you think and a little more willing to sit down and discuss. But I think Mingson, you made a great point with some of that in the grassroots reporting.
I just would like to add one more thing. Aside from the stories and the people we had spoke to, there was a lot of things that we had seen that were kind of just, very like, whoa, like being here in Nebraska. Nebraska is very unique because we don't have a 2-house system. We have a unicameral. So we only have one house. We have 49 senators, and it's the only governing or lawmaking body in Nebraska, and it's also the smallest in the country. And historically speaking, Nebraska, our senators usually vote like over 80% the same way, like on everything. But during this time, there was a lot of unprecedented things that we didn't see before. I mean, we would have hundreds of people flooding the rotunda every day, shouting through the glass to the point where you could hear it on the microphones being picked up by senators as they were speaking on the floor. People in the balconies throwing things onto the legislature floor to try to like halt the proceedings. Senators filibustering for weeks on end. Yeah, that video right there. It was just quite a sight to see and just experience all the things that were happening, especially in, a home state like mine that had never seen things like this before. And then going to DC and seeing the marches that were happening and speaking to the people there. There was just like a lot of interesting things to witness and just record for the content.
Thank you so much. So my next question kind of continues off of what you two were talking about. Were there any big, like, surprising incidents that you sort of happened to encounter or you deliberately sought out while you were working on this project?
I feel like, speaking logistically, every time a source dropped out of an interview, that was surprising all on its own. Um, you know, I think for us, really, on the maternal health side, I think again, going through that lawsuit and like seeing all those names, seeing all these stories in there, that was maybe surprising is not the right word, but it was like deeply impactful, I think. I think in our reporting on that, like you just felt it. And I think it kind of took you out of this like this zone where you're just kind of looking at things on paper and to a place where you're like, wow, there is really these real stories that you have to grapple with. It you live in the same world as these people. I think that is felt when you're reporting on it, and I certainly hope our audiences felt that watching and reading our work. For me personally, on the prosecutor story, I kind of expected it to lean more one way than another. I know when I originally started reporting, I reported on an attorney in Florida who had been removed after he said he wasn't going to, pursue charges for abortion cases, per Florida laws at the time. But then I started reporting in Arizona, and in Florida, this was obviously a Republican governor, making life difficult for a Democratic attorney. Flip side in Arizona, though, we had a Democratic governor who was saying, well, I'm going to, do this, this, and this, and tell prosecutors they can't do this, this, and this when it comes to abortion stuff. And you had, prosecutors, Republicans and Democrats both saying, you are way overstepping. And that was fascinating to me to really see like, wow, there's some of the obvious politics you would expect as fallout out of this, but a lot of unexpected stuff too, and just seeing how this decision changed how people worked and how the criminal justice system had changed. So that was surprising for me and just I think really interesting to report on.
I don't know if there was anything that was like, well, I guess there were, like what I was just saying with Nebraska and things like that. There were some surprising things seeing that in my home state here. But I think what was really interesting was going to DC for the 1 year anniversary and seeing two different groups. So you had people who were anti-abortion who were there. And then you had people for reproductive rights who were there. And I thought the crowd sizes would be bigger than what they were. For those who were anti-abortion, because this was a 1 year anniversary of something that they had been fighting so long for. But it wasn't, and just speaking with some people there, I think a lot of people had just become not tired of the issue, but kind of just exhausted with just everything that was going on. Because I feel like all of 2023, it's like every day there was something new that we were hearing, and being in the newsroom, it was every day something new that we were hearing. But yeah, and just speaking with different people and hearing different perspectives. And we met this group who was holding a vigil outside of a Planned Parenthood in DC. And they identify themselves as progressive anti-abortionists. And so they have all these deeply held progressive views and beliefs, but are anti-abortion. And just hearing that, and then seeing them also clash with people who identify as more conservative, but also anti-abortionist, and just seeing how there was still a divide between the groups, even though they were coming together on one common issue. So I think that was very surprising to see. And so at that point, we were kind of just like, well, like this is really a complex thing, you know. It's not like a one size fits all for all groups, and not everybody fits in the exact same category on what they believe this issue should be. Did you want to say something, Mingson?
I think Mingson put a few things in the chat for people to look at. But okay, so the America After Roe website is completely free to access and free to use for any journalists. So A, was that like a difficult thing to figure out and arrange? And B, how have you seen journalists using this material so far?
So News 21, we make our content available to all free of charge. And we do that for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, because it's exceptional work. So I always say this isn't the work of student journalists. This is just journalism. They're just journalists, and they're amazing journalists. And so I want to get that content out there and get it used because it's top notch. And I want the student journalists to get their content used. But look, let's be honest, we're also seeing a lot of challenges in local journalism. And people need good content, and this is terrific content. So we feel very, very strongly about making our content available for use. And with this project, I mean, you know, and we just put out our latest project, which is an examination of Gulp, the state of American democracy. You know, the AP picks up our stories, USA Today, last year, the 19th, which has really been such a leader in coverage of abortion and abortion care. Uh, you know, Houston Landing, you name it. So we've gotten a ton of usage. Last year, we also got usage in Mexico on a story that some of our fellows did related to abortion care and the challenges in the immigrant community, getting abortion pills, getting abortion care. So yeah, that's why we do it.
All right, awesome. Do any of you guys have any other additional comments? Or did she summarize it pretty well?
I was going to say, yeah, Pauline did such an amazing job being a guiding hand through all of this. She's been a great mentor to all of us, and helping bring out the best in everyone's talents and gifts to this reporting project. So we definitely could not have done it without her. And it was also great working with Elise and Mingson and all the other reporters. You know, Elise, seeing her connect with people and, you know, making people feel at ease was really, really inspiring to see. And also the work that Mingson was able to produce and put together, that was also really cool. I got to learn some things from him, and you know, we bounced ideas off of each other. We worked really well together, and I really do appreciate the opportunity getting to meet, you know, someone from Florida and someone from Vegas and getting to work together with them. So that was really cool.
No, I echo that 100%. You know, Pauline is very gracious and, you know, thoughtful in telling us that we had top-notch work, but I think, you know, A, was not at all possible without her, and B, it was the result of, you know, working with a newsroom of excellent journalists. You know, I think we all had our individual projects, but I mean, just, you know, the resources and the collaboration between projects was so incredibly useful and insightful, but at the same time, just having a crew of dedicated journalists to come into the office with every day. There were definitely days where I was a little bit tired at the end of my rope with certain things, but to get in there and see, you know, my colleagues just delivering the best of the best in their work, to have that encouragement, just to see, you know, how hard everyone was working. I think that's why we were able to do some of the top-notch work we did.
Yeah, I still say that News 21 was the highlight of my college career. Um, and what enabled us to do this coverage was Pauline, her taking the initiative on so many different things. It it still blows my mind on how much she was able to do and how many things and topics she tackled across different mediums for print, video, visuals, whatever. Her doing all that, I've never seen any other editor come close to. And being in a newsroom with other journalists to collaborate on this one topic over those 7 months, but specifically for those 10 weeks, was what enabled us to do well in our coverage. Being able to focus on our stories and this topic exclusively without any distractions, and being able to work with some of the most talented journalists, student journalists.
Yeah, well, first of all, y'all are all very kind. But we have a team of editors and we can do it without all of them. But here's what I will say in terms of this content. So they traveled, and I'd have to look at how many different cities and how many different states, including into Mexico. The thing that's unique about this is they had the ability to go all across the country, not for a day, not for 2 days, but to actually spend time on the ground reporting these stories out. And that's the difference in terms of really telling these stories and telling, especially human rights stories. You've got to take the time, you've got to spend the time, you've got to invest it to build trust among your sources, to get people to actually want to talk to you. So I think that's something that's very unique about the program is, again, they started reporting on it from afar in January, but then come summer, we have the ability to treat them as though they're national enterprise writers for a major organization and send them out and spend time to produce truly, again, exceptional work.
Thank you so much, guys. All right, so jumping back a little bit to a previous question. So as you spoke to a lot of people with a wide range of views, do you think after seeing, so much of the sort of heart and soul of America regarding this issue, do you think compromise is possible? Given the level of polarization between parties in the US, do you think any level of cross-party collaboration is possible, soon?
I'm going to jump in on this one first. So we know what the polls say, or I hope everybody knows what the polls say, because polling shows actually that most people in America believe that abortion should be legal. Okay. There was a Pew poll, and I'm looking at my notes now, a Pew poll just from earlier this year, 63% of Americans said abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Just today, just a few hours ago, an AP NORC Center poll came out related to Hispanic Americans, often, and I am Latina, often, considered very conservative. Most Hispanic Americans also believe that abortion should be legal. So we know what the public thinks. But in terms of compromise, I mean, look, let's face it. Our states and our state legislatures are incredibly divided and incredibly partisan. So I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I'm not sure if we're going to see compromise. And the fact of the matter is a lot of this, the battles continue in the courts. So who knows? But I think the legislatures are very divided, very partisan, and this is in many ways going to come down to how the citizens vote on a lot of these propositions that have already been voted on and that will be coming up in November. Now, the Supreme Court, some people think that the Supreme Court's, that there was a little bit of compromise when it made its decision related to Idaho's ban in particular. But I think it's going to come down to the public and the citizens and, continuing to be heard and have their opinions on this matter be heard.
I agree. I think it was in Kansas that there was that shocking ballot initiative that had passed where they voted to enshrine access within their constitution. Being here in Nebraska just a few weeks ago, I went to a press release for a group called Protect Our Rights, who launched a petition drive to place the question on our ballot in November, and that passed. And so when I was speaking with the volunteers and the people who were kind of running it, I was, asking them, I'm like, do you think this is just like the future of how this is going to be? Whatever happens in the legislature, it's just going to go to ballot initiative after ballot initiative. And they said, big issues like this, yeah, but I mean, having a statewide petition drive costs millions of dollars. And so getting the funding to be able to do something like that. But I think, yeah, with big issues like this, it's just going to go to the citizens in the form of ballot initiatives, regardless of how partisan things are within the legislatures.
Yeah, no, to jump in on that. I'm glad Pauline went first. I was worried my answer would be a little cynical sounding, but now that we're all on the same page. I think, yeah, compromise is tricky. I think, Pauline put it well when she said, look, we've got really polarized people in politics right now, especially. I was actually kind of thinking and talking about this with my mom on the phone today, which is kind of my journalistic go-to whenever I'm talking questions and things like that out. We've got people with very deeply held beliefs and values on both sides of this issue. Um, I think ultimately the issues of legality, of what, is going to be socially or legally okay, not okay. I don't know if we'll ever find compromise on that. But what I think you do see when you are looking outside of the, hyper partisan, super polarized groups, whether that be, average citizens or politicians, which I think are just not that big a group and just happen to be very loud. And, if you're a politician, a little more powerful. I think most people have what we might call, like a more compromised view of things. I think, like Pauline said, we're seeing a lot of people who do think, at least in some capacity, abortion should be available and legal. And I think as journalists, we're not trying to reach compromise. We're not trying to find some middle ground for people to land on. We're trying to deliver the facts. And I think that's how you get to where people can take their values on both sides of things and reconcile them to the facts and say, how do we deal with this? I think, again, that example of speaking with that legislator in Florida, and having to ask her, like, hey, listen, I get it that you value families. I don't think anyone is, criticizing valuing families and, people. But how do you reconcile the laws that you're drafting with, some of the facts of a 6-week abortion ban doesn't account for some of the medical emergencies that might require an abortion? So I think as journalists, I'm stealing this from someone on Twitter, and I'm so sorry I did not see the name of this person, but they put it really well on a different issue. But as journalists, we're not telling you how to think or how to view things. We're giving you the bricks and you build the house with them. We're going to give you the facts, and you have to reconcile those to your values, to what you believe, to what you see. And you have to be able to make something sturdy out of it. So I think, will we ever see compromise? Maybe not. I think there are always going to be people who aren't looking at the facts, who are, sticking to these very partisan beliefs. But I think for the most part, people, whatever their values, are willing to say, how do we apply those values with the facts? And as journalists, we supply the facts.
Thank you so much. That was a super, super thoughtful response. So I guess continuing off of that, you were saying that you hope that people sort of take the information and try to reconcile it with their own beliefs. What do you think, what would you say the most important points that people should take away from your work are?
I think for me, with maternal health reporting, just the diversity of situations there are, again, that might require an abortion. Not just looking at it as like demonizing people. I think, again, when you get these hyper partisan kind of discussions and talking points, you're looking at things through a very kind of malicious lens on either side of the, of this argument or the issue. I think, looking at stories like the Zarowskis and saying, like, man, this is a couple who really wanted kids. These are not these, straw men I've put into my mind. These are real people. I hope that, anyone who sees our work takes away these real people, takes away these real circumstances, and, is willing to just sit with that for a second and, whatever your values or beliefs are, to, sit with those real people and see those real people. As journalists, I think again, you're never guaranteed results, outcomes of what people are going to take away from your reporting, especially when it comes to facts, figures, numbers, all that stuff, because, you know, there's always something new coming out. There's always some way to reinterpret a number, but, you know, I would hope that people can look at a person and look at a story and take that away no matter what, and really be able to just connect with that person through our reporting.
I agree with that. I think humanizing the issue definitely helps people see it in a different way, putting, you know, a face behind the story and letting people see how it has truly impacted people. It's not just like a figment of your imagination, like, oh, well, what if this happens or this happens? No, this actually happened to this group of people. This is how it happened, and this is why it happened. And another thing, too, I would think legislatively that people have more power than, you know, they think they do, to go out and make differences on things that are important to them, right? So like I was saying earlier with ballot measures and things like that, like those are people-driven grassroots movements to change kind of the direction their state in particular is going. And so I think that is one thing that I really want people to take away from it, you know, try to see how you fit in the grand scheme of all of this and what you can do, regardless of where on what side you land on. But yeah, humanizing the issue was kind of the number one thing. And in the mini documentary that I produced, that was kind of a big part of it. Like hearing doctors say, like, this is a situation, this is how it's been impacting me and my patients. Dr. Crystal Berry Roberts in Austin, Texas, spoke about how she now has patients who are kind of like, I don't want to say lying to her, but kind of not giving her the full information of what they're doing, having to seek care in different states or things like that because they don't want her to be, you know, have repercussions or be retaliated against. And so just seeing how this plays out and also how the complexity of the situation affects different people in different ways.
100% on the humanizing, not demonizing people, as Elise and Desiree mentioned. Well, that regardless of where you stand, that you're able to learn from and empathize with these different scenarios. None of these stories are necessarily black and white, even if while you may look at a certain topic with particularly strong feelings, there are a lot of reasons why someone's moral compass or their experiences may shape why they believe a certain way.
I'll jump in super quickly. I think I want people to take away that it's really confusing out there. That was one of our headlines on this incredible story that several of our fellows worked on, where they examined abortion legislation across all 50 states last year and what was happening. It's incredibly confusing. I have heard from fellow professors who aren't entirely sure of what the abortion landscape in their state is right now. So I think people, if you care about this issue, one way or the other, educate yourself. It's continuing to change. And yeah, we have a quite varied landscape across this country right now on this issue. I don't know. I guess I would say, please educate yourself on what's happening out there. Especially ahead of November, right? When again, we know that this is going to be on the ballot in so many different states, and you need to know what you're looking at and what you're deciding upon.
All right, thank you so much. So, last question, because we're almost out of time. So what advice would you give to any student journalists who are watching this right now, or who may be watching the recording, given the challenges of, you know, reporting in the current political landscape?
Okay, I'm going to jump in first, but of course, my former student journalist should really answer this. Don't give up. Don't give up. and be patient. This type of reporting in whatever political landscape and whatever you're reporting on, abortion, or even if it's just the election, climate, whatever it may be, it takes perseverance and time to get at these stories. And also be open to what you're going to hear. Don't go into your interviews thinking, nope, this is what I'm looking to get, right? Because you're going to get something you're going to get so much more if you're open and if you're truly listening. But it takes time and it takes perseverance and it takes a lot of patience, and you cannot give up if you want to do this type of reporting. And now I'm going to let the students answer.
Yeah.
The former students answer. Sorry.
Yeah, being
My goodness, Elise froze.
Yeah, I was about to say y'all froze for a second there. I wasn't sure if frozen. Yeah, being open. Just, I again, this was a big topic. And I was like very nervous going into it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna be super open and I'm gonna just listen and do my best. I would say if you can be open without stressing yourself out about being open, great route to go. I think, the more relaxed you are about things, the better you are at being open. But, like, don't limit yourself. I had like this really like boo, 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 boo kind of like vision board for my reporting when I stepped into ASU's office. Pauline is remembering the charts that I showed her, and I'm a little embarrassed about them now. I had this vision of like I'm gonna report on criminalization and all this stuff, and that didn't really happen because I didn't find much of anything. But I'm reporting on prosecutors, and I was like, okay, this is really weird. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm gonna take it somewhere. A lot of these big issues intersect with a lot of different things, so there's like so much to report on, so much to find. If you're sitting there stressing out about how you're not getting one thing, you're gonna completely miss the other thing. So just, like Pauline said, keep going, stay open, stay open to your sources and these viewpoints. I think that's important, but like staying open to the actual subject matter is just immensely helpful in like discovering all this stuff that you did not know you could report on. Like, again, if you had told me in January, yeah, you're going to be reporting on the intersection of politics and, legal challenges for prosecutors and, how they, have limited oversight, I would have gone, huh? Like, you find this stuff out as you report, and it's a joy to report on because then you get something cool that nobody else is reporting on.
I would say don't be afraid, because at the end of the day, you're just talking to people, and a lot of times people do want to share their stories, and want to be heard. Going comfortable talking to people at restaurants, asking how business is doing. When you're at an event, asking how security is going. If they've noticed anything, a lot of times you will find leads for stories that way. But also by just being there constantly and talking to people, you'll find, especially when you're doing local reporting, you're ingratiating yourself in the community and being recognized more at events, which in turn also helps you find and generate more leads for stories.
I would agree with both what they said. Being flexible with things. The documentary that I made wasn't the original plan. And we kind of just went with the flow, and it came out more amazing than what I anticipated it could have become. Not being afraid to talk to people, like Ming said. If you are nervous, your subject is going to know you are, and that is going to make them feel much more timid. But if you go into it, strongly, professionally, that definitely puts people at ease because they understand, okay, this person's here to do a job. They're really serious about this reporting. And I feel like that's how you can get more out of people. And also just being open and willing to learn new mediums and different things. You just never know when you are going to be needed to take a photo or help shoot a video or, get like a soundbite or an audio piece or things like that. Just being able to expand your horizons in the mediums that you do. I primarily do photo and video, but just past News 21 after that, expanding more into writing and things like that. Because I know we had reporting teams where people got split up. So we had writers have to go in and take some photos or take videos or things like that, or audio or whatever the case may be. So just being flexible and just being open to expanding your horizons with the type of mediums that you're exploring.
right. If that was the end, thank you all so much for your super insightful responses and advice today. We appreciate it a lot, and congratulations again on winning the award. Everyone can go access their, I believe on the RFK website, there's a link for the website that contains all of their journalism. If everyone in the audience would like to go read that after this is done. And yeah, thank you to everyone for watching, and thank you to Karen for hosting this conversation.
Yeah, and we are at time, so I just want to thank all of you, Ross. Thank you for moderating, Pauline, Elise, Jazari. My brain is like, there's so much in my head now. So Mingson, thank you so much. This was so thoughtful. And as we continue our work to protect, promote, and defend human rights, we have so much to learn from all of you and the thoughtful care through which you dove into this very complicated and difficult topic. It was really, I wish everybody could watch this, and we will push this out. So thank you for so much. I did put in the chat for everyone a link that will get you to Ross's film. And if you enjoyed this, please share with family and friends on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram. And if you have questions or ideas or thoughts or feedback for more work that we could do from the human rights education perspective at RFK Human Rights, please reach out to me at robinson@rfkhumanrights.org. Pretty simple. Our work to bend the arc of history more toward the dignity and worth of all people is our mission, and your work and what you've done and what you're doing really contributes to that. So thank you again. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. Take good care and take care of each other. Cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.